Diolch yn fawr, Archesgob, a diolch i chi gyd am ddod. Thank you very much for your attendance here. It's a very great privilege to be asked to address this audience, and I've been grateful for the opportunity of focusing my ideas, such as they are a little bit, on these rather ambitious subjects that I put in the title. In a conversation a couple of months ago at Canary Wharf in London, a senior manager in financial services observed that recent years had seen an erosion of the notion that certain enterprises necessarily took time to deliver, and that therefore it was a mistake to look for maximal profits on the basis of a balance sheet covering only 1 or 2 years. There had been, he suggested, a deep and systemic impatience with the whole idea of taking time to arrive at a desired goal, and thus with a great deal of the understanding of both labour and the building of confidence. Either an enterprise delivered or it didn't, and the question could be answered in a brief and measurable time span. And for all the rhetoric about accountability and getting your money's worth, the effect of such assumptions in all kinds of settings has been a spectacular failure to understand the variety of ways in which responsible practice might be gauged, whether in relation to investment in actual production, or in relation to new financial products, whose sustainability and reliability can only be proved after the passage of time. Very much the same kind of impatience has also been part of the tidal wave of assault on the historic professions, including the law, teaching and academic research, and some aspects of public service. The short-term curse continues to afflict the voluntary sector in the absurd timescales attached to grant-giving. But all of that is material for a lecture in its own right. In connection specifically with the financial crisis, though, the main point is about what appropriate patience might look like where various financial and commercial enterprises are concerned. The loss of a sense of appropriate time is a major cultural development, and it necessarily changes how we think about trust and relationship. Trust is learned gradually, rather than being automatically deliverable according to a set of static conditions laid down. It involves a degree of human judgment, which in turn involves a degree of awareness of one's own human character and that of others. It involves a degree of literacy about the signals of trustworthiness, a shared culture of understanding what is said and done in a human society. And this learning entails unavoidable insecurity. I don't control others, and I don't control the passage of time and the processes of nature. Even the processes of human labour are limited by things outside my control, the capacities of human bodies. And my lack of a definitive and authoritative perspective, a universal perspective, means that I may make mistakes because I misread others or because I miscalculate the levels of uncertainty in the processes I deal in. And the further away I get from these areas of learning by trial and error, the further away I get from the inevitable risks of living in a material and limited world, and the more easily I can persuade myself that I am, after all, in control. Although people have spoken of greed as the source of our current problems, I suspect that it goes deeper. It's a little too easy to blame the present situation on an accumulation of individual greed, exemplified by bankers or brokers, and to lose sight of the fact that governments committed to deregulation and to the encouragement of speculation and high personal borrowing were elected repeatedly in Britain and the United States for a crucial couple of decades. Add to that the fact that warnings were not lacking of some of the risks of poor or no regulation, and we're left with the question of what it was that skewed the judgment of a whole society as well as financial professionals. John Dunning, a professional analyst of the business world, wrote some 6 years ago about what he called the crisis in the moral ecology of unregulated capitalism. And he and other contributors to the book from which that phrase comes discussed how what he calls circles of failure could be created in the global economy by a combination of moral indifference, institutional crisis, and market failure, each feeding on the other. Yet, warnings went unheeded. People's rational capacities, it seems, were blunted, and unregulated global capitalism was assumed to be the natural way of doing things, based on a set of rational market processes that would deliver results in everyone's interest. This was not just about greed. At least some apologists for the naturalness of the unregulated market pointed, quite reasonably in the circumstances, to the apparently infallible capacity of the market to free nations from poverty. It may help to turn for illumination to an unexpected source. In the Christian monastic tradition, acquisitiveness is associated with pride, the root of all human error and failure. Pride, which is most clearly evident in the refusal to acknowledge my lack of control over my environment, my illusion that I can shape the world according to my will. And if that's correct, then the origin of economic dysfunction and injustice is pride. A pride that is manifest in the reluctance to let go of systems and projects that promise more and more secure control, and so has a bad effect on our reasoning powers. And this in turn suggests that economic justice arrives only when everyone recognizes some kind of shared vulnerability and limitation in a world of limits and processes, psychological as well as material, that can't be bypassed. We are delivered or converted not simply by resolving in a vacuum to be less greedy, but by understanding what it is to live as an organism which grows and changes, and which is thus involved in risk. We change because our minds or mindsets are changed and steered away from certain powerful but toxic myths.